Well, welcome to Monday edition of Living Life with Michael Edward, and I'm Michael. And today I'm having on a guest that I've had before, Rosalind Peterson, and she's with Agriculture Defense Coalition and California Skywatch. That's a couple of her sites. You can catch her just like it sounds online, agriculturedefensecoalition.org. And if you want to check out what she has there on what's falling from our skies, you can go to California Skywatch, which is just like it sounds, CaliforniaSkywatch.com. Anyway, Rosalind brought up to a few of us this new herbicide that DuPont has manufactured that's out there, and now it looks like there's some evidence it likes to kill evergreen trees. In fact, it's becoming, from what I've been reading today, to catch up on a little bit of what Rosalind has already found out, it's a catastrophe. So without any further delay, Rosalind, thank you for being on my show again, and you always have breaking news.
Well, sometimes I do, but thank you very much for having me as a guest on your show. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you today.
Well, it's reciprocal. What is it with this? DuPont's got this new herbicide, and that's what we're going to talk about. We've got up to 2 hours here today, and we're going to spend whatever time we need to talk about first with this DuPont herbicide, they call it. I'm sorry, I've got a total blank on the name. Imprellis, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, it's called Imprellis, Imprellis. You can look it up online. Imprellis is an herbicide that is listed as one of DuPont's products. And an herbicide, in case you don't know, is it's a chemical that will kill weeds. They think that a lot of weeds that we have with us are noxious, and therefore there's a number of products called herbicides on the market that have been used to kill different types of weeds. And one of the things that happened with Imprellis, which is manufactured by the DuPont Chemical Company, is that it was recently approved back in October with a minimum of actual studies, either health studies or with knowledge about the type of damage that it can do. And so what happened was they decided that it wasn't safe enough for the public to apply it, so they made a decision that they were only going to have professional commercial people who apply these types of products to golf courses, to parks, public parks, to playgrounds, to areas where schools, areas where children play, pets run, all kinds of things, where they wanted to keep the weeds down. And they only want the grass to grow. And so what they've done is DuPont said, oh, well, you just apply it according to label directions and everything should be fine. Well, beginning last October, they said, well, this product is wonderful. It really does work. It kills all of these noxious weeds we don't like. And so commercial people across the United States began to apply this material in parks and golf courses and all kinds of places, backyards, wherever they were hired to come in and to professionally, essentially liquidate weeds. So all of a sudden now, thousands and thousands of trees are dying across the United States in areas where this chemical was applied. Mm-hmm. And one of the Michigan State University professors, David Roberts, notes that much of the damage, quote, he's quoting, much of the damage we're seeing was unexpected, Roberts said. Even some of the professional landscapers who applied it were shocked by the damage. And so what happens is this product apparently doesn't biodegrade. And so when it rains, then this product moves down into the ground and into groundwater, can get into tree root areas, and then from there the trees just suck it up and it kills the trees. And the possibility that not only trees but other off-site plants and trees that aren't expected may have died, and since nobody was looking for this, it may be even worse than we think.
I was reading up on it, and I had never heard of it until this came to my attention through you. And there was a article that was in the New York Times that I'm going to quote part of what they had, and this is what really seemed the key to me, and I'm sure you're going to agree. They said that Imprellis, which DuPont makes this broadleaf herbicide, is sold in all states except for California and New York because they have a separate review procedure besides the national EPA. They have their own EPA-type procedure to, approve products like this. So according to the New York Times, in New York and New York State, they had informed DuPont that there were two problems with Imprellis, and of course they did not approve it. One, that it does not bind with soil, and two, that it leaches into the groundwater, which you just mentioned. So I think there's the key. New York State, by not approving it, said, look, we found these two problems. It's not binding with the soil. And then, of course, since it's not sticking or binding with the soil, it's going straight into the groundwater, and evergreen trees especially apparently like to pick it up, or they're the first ones to so far. Who knows how many other trees it's going to affect.
Well, if it gets into the groundwater or runs off, if you have rains, it floods, it runs off into rivers and streams, because it doesn't degrade, it apparently is going to be a problem when it gets into those areas as well. That's why a lot of us are concerned about this particular product, because it isn't going to go away. It isn't going to stay put where it's sprayed. It's going to move into other areas.
Well, I'm thinking if this is going in the groundwater and it's affecting trees, how does it affect people? Because it's going in the groundwater, whether it ends up in a reservoir, whether it's from our wells that even community systems use for their water supply, if it's in the groundwater, how does it affect us if it's already affecting trees like this? And nobody seems to have that answer. And apparently the EPA, according to the New York Times, was testing it for 23 months. But what did they do? Just throw it on a bunch of dandelions and say it's okay? Apparently they didn't test it very well.
Well, even the toxicological testing is that they rushed the process and didn't do much testing on it. And I've only seen one toxicological set of information from the EPA. But the problem was they said, well, we didn't test for this and we didn't test for that. We looked at it a little bit, but not much. And so what happened is that because this apparently worked so well, they thought that they would rush it to market. And you have to also look at the fact that some of the testing is done by DuPont itself, who has a vested interest in making sure that their product is marketed and approved by the EPA. So you don't have independent people always doing the testing. You have someone with a vested interest. So I have clear concerns about this, and I don't believe that they go through extensive testing. I think that they decide what they're going to test for or what they don't, and we don't know the worst of it. But I do have something from DuPont you may be interested in. Mm-hmm. DuPont is required by federal law to provide a material safety data sheet. It's called an MSDS, and this is online. The company is required to put it online. And one of the things they talk about is you're not supposed to contaminate water, food, or feed with this product. And if you apply it, you're supposed to wear protective eyewear to prevent contact with this substance. And you have to wear, in other words, certain types of shirts and pants and shoes. And the other thing about this product is, since it doesn't go away, and I'll use a golf course, or we can think of it as in other words, a public park as an example. When this chemical is sprayed, they don't tell people not to go back in and wait a certain period of time before they can go back in, and the dogs and the pets and the children run around and play ball and do all these things, even though in this section it says if you go into an entry area which has been treated, okay, like if a worker goes into a treated area after it's once been treated, he's supposed to avoid contact with anything. And he's supposed to wear chemical-resistant gloves of any waterproofing material. He has to wear shoes and socks. He can't go barefoot. He has to follow very stringent procedures to go back in after an area is treated. Well, when you don't post areas, backyard grasses areas, if you don't post the golf courses and tell people they can't go back on, people are not wearing proper clothing. They also can have eye damage. In other words, with this product, that's another issue here that we look at in their material safety data sheet. So when you say, this is their own, I'm quoting right from their document, it can cause moderate eye irritation. It says, do not get in eyes or on clothing. It says potential health effects could occur if you're exposed to this material. Irritation with discomfort, pain, redness, or visual impairment of the eyes. Well, the thing is that our kids crawl around on the grass. They put their hands on their face. They get down on the ground. You pet your pets who's rolled on the grass. Golfers who play golf roll their balls across the course. They pick it up. They put it in their pockets. It's all around. Well, you start to look at this and you wonder how toxic this really is, considering that they have to put this in their actual data sheet.
Yeah. Which
now,
now
the other thing is that once you get done using this product, you have to take off all the clothes. You have to wash down with soap and water everything, and then you have to put on clean clothes because everything gets contaminated from this. Well, the thing is that this isn't a product that the people that apply it, they have to be extremely careful with it. But it apparently, even in the newspaper articles that you were reading, it says that lawn clippings, suppose that I mow the grass and I take the lawn clippings and I compost them or I put them somewhere else. The thing is that the lawn clippings are toxic and can also leach into the ground and cause problems. Great.
So if you turn around and take your lawn clippings, and a lot of people will put that in their garden areas and such because it's good for it. It helps rejuvenate the soil. They could end up poisoning everything they got.
That's correct.
Well, I guess that would be great weed control, huh? Of course, it'll also kill all the crops you're trying to grow in your garden. Wonderful. This is just another example.
Think about this. In handling and storage on this DuPont material data safety sheet, it says when you get done, you have to wash everything with soap and water before eating, drinking, chewing gum, using tobacco, or even using the toilet. It says here, remove clothing immediately, wash thoroughly, and put on clean clothing. Now, this has to be highly toxic for them to put this into their material safety data sheet.
Mm-hmm. And this is part of where you said in the beginning, this was approved for commercial application only. Obviously, why? It's some real super dangerous stuff.
That's correct. And it also says, do not apply directly to water or to areas where surface water is present or to intertidal areas. it says, do not contaminate water when cleaning equipment or disposing of equipment, wash water, or rinsate. So you have to, where are you going to put this water when you're cleaning up? In other words, it's going to go somewhere, and it doesn't biodegrade. So therefore, what's happening is this water during a rain can move off-site, get into tree roots, get into other plants, and across the United States we're seeing the effect of what this chemical is doing to trees.
Well, that's there's a term for that. I'm pretty sure they call that translocation, something like that, where
Yes.
when something is applied to one area, and whether it leaches or it's surface water or whatever, that it translocates into other areas. And I know with agriculture, that's been a serious problem with using Roundup and using some of the GM products at a field where it contaminates an organic field. So that, am I right? Because you're the agricultural expert here. That's called translocation, right? Where one contaminates the other.
That's right. It can move. It just means that it can move from one place to the other. But the rub with this is that already thousands of trees across the United States have been impacted by this, and the EPA has not pulled it off the market. The other thing is that the company that you hire to remove the weeds in your backyard or front yard or wherever these companies are using this chemical is that they don't have to post it to tell you how dangerous it is. And that your children you shouldn't apply the chemical and then your children go into these areas.
So you're saying that they can use this in a park to get rid of all the dandelions and the broadleaf weeds that everybody doesn't want. They just want their pretty grass in the park, and that after they spray this, they're not required to put up any signs of a warning, a danger, nothing, that kids could literally go on that sprayed area right after they're done?
That's correct. But the product itself, see, you don't have to tell anybody that it's been sprayed there. But when your children and kids go there, since they don't post it, they don't know that reentry into that area is prohibited by the people that apply it unless they're in these uniforms to protect themselves from the chemical because it's so toxic.
Wow. Wow. That's what got me with that 23 months supposedly that the EPA looked at this. They must have been looking the other way. That's all I can say, because apparently like you said, all right, they went by what DuPont tested and showed. Well, of course we know that's going to be biased. It's their product, but still, isn't the EPA supposed to have some independent thinking there somewhere? I guess maybe that's gone out the window too. We're not really testing anymore because this is an obvious problem with absorbing into the soil and into the groundwater. Good grief! They had to know that was going to happen.
They had to know it was going to happen, but you see, the company said, well, if you don't apply near trees, is what they were saying. You have to apply some distance. But what's happening is that you get a rain, or you've got groundwater, or you water your lawn, for example. That would say that they go in and they spray, and then the next day someone waters their lawn. That water, if they do a lot of watering, then the water leaches into the groundwater where the trees are. And that's what's been happening is that the trees, old trees, young trees, it doesn't matter. As soon as it gets into the root, the tree is dying. And you would think that the EPA and our government agencies would immediately remove this from the market. It's a product that works much too good, but that it doesn't biodegrade, and it could be toxic to anybody being in the area right after a spraying. And you know what? Golf courses spray all the time, but they never shut down the next day. That means that there's an exposure that they go in, spray, in the evening or the morning, and then people go and play on the golf course. There's no protection for those people from the chemicals. They're not even going to know that this place was sprayed and that there could be a hazard.
And it's all over their golf shoes, and
on their balls. They pick up their balls. They put their bags on the ground sometimes. They put their clubs on the ground. They pick it up. They're eating. They're handling different things during the course of playing. And it says right in their MSDS sheet that you're not supposed to do that.
Boy. Wow. Well, here's maybe some good news that it might bring it to light. A few days ago, I was looking, I saw that in Michigan, this golf and country club sued DuPont. But now, according to the news today, that there's a class action lawsuit that particular country club has got against DuPont with this Imprellis. And they're saying on behalf of every user and every place that DuPont Imprellis has been used, they're saying the loss of thousands, if not tens of thousands, of just mature pine and spruce trees. They're only talking about two species of trees. What I was also reading in other places was there are other evergreen trees besides those two that are being affected. So this thing is turning into a very quick, large-scale disaster. And it's only, as you said, it's only been out since October. It's not much of a trial.
No, but DuPont had to know, because in their label directions they said, well, don't put it too close to trees. Well, they had to know it would kill trees. But the thing is that when this chemical stays potent for long periods of time, it's a disaster area waiting to happen, because it's going to flow into all kinds of areas which people are not going to be aware of. And so when they see the trees dying along a creek, when they see these other impacts, they won't know what causes it. And so it's obvious that if you spray an area and a tree right there dies, then you have some sort of obvious. But areas where it's not so obvious, where this is leached into groundwater and kills things at a distance away, is not quite so obvious. But the potential is really there.
Mm-hmm. One forum I was reading, Rosalind, said that, and this was from landscapers. It's a forum that was online. I can't remember where it was, but one of them was discussing that they have seen and can. Since that's their job, that's their profession, they're seeing where it's attacking new growth, especially. So that would explain why, especially now here, this is still the growing season. It's going after new growth first, and they've been saying on there, these professional landscapers in an informal forum on the internet, no scientific study behind it, but I mean, these guys know what they're talking about, saying that any new growth, it affects it immediately. So we got a real problem. This is like the same things are showing up with Roundup, and I'm sure you know that too, where, how many years they've been using Roundup and they say it's safe. I can testify to the fact I got a neighbor using Roundup for 3 years, and just on a fence line. And now he's complaining that it's not working anymore because there's new types of weeds that are coming up that the Roundup won't kill. Well, it's killed everything else, but now there are new things coming that are not native to Florida where we're living that are popping up that Roundup won't kill. It's all new species now that are evolving out of all this. So we're kind of creating with these chemicals and this genetic engineering and everything, we're creating a biological nightmare.
Oh, I think we are. And I think that in other words, we have the technology to make these chemicals very potent. And the problem is that they not only kill the plants, they have the potential to kill the bugs, beneficial bugs. They have the potential to disrupt all kinds of, in other words, normal environmental environments. And that I think that people just want a quick, they want to go out and just spray something, and instead of pulling it up, they want to just go spray it, and they think that spraying's the answer. Mm-hmm. But I can tell you from working with the California Department of Agriculture and the Mendocino Department of Agriculture that we have what's called star thistle here. And it's a plant we don't like. And what happens is that instead of spraying it, there's no way to spray all the areas where this plant can infest itself. And it's a noxious weed. But what they did is they took biological controls. They said, look, we can't possibly spray every place that this star thistle shows up. So what we're going to do is we're going to put a biological control, a bug that only preys on star thistle, and we're going to release it in Mendocino County and other areas. And once the bug was released, the star thistle came under control and stopped becoming a widespread pest. So, and this bug doesn't hurt anything else that it's on. It doesn't eat anything else. It just likes and lives on star thistle. So as the star thistle population is reduced, so is the bug. But
the theory,
this is where we need to be going, is using biological controls. We need to be using other things that are not harmful to the environment.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, with chemicals, the problem with that is it actually does change the biology of what surrounds it as well. And that's why I always keep saying, once you start messing with the biosphere, whether it's, with the water or with the soil or in the air or whatever, whether it's caused by chemicals or whatever, you start causing the biological, natural things to change because they have to either adapt to what's been done to them, so to speak, or they attach to new things that come from the chemical treatments, or they create new things. And that's where this can all get out of hand, and that's what we're seeing even with this Imprellis. It's something that heading into the water supply, it means it's probably affecting us at this point of anybody who is near an area that they would even have a well for their drinking water. They're going to have this in their drinking water. And as you said, the hazard sheet put out by DuPont themselves, you're not supposed to have the stuff on your hands. You can't go to the bathroom with it on you. You have to get those clothes off. It's that dangerous. So if it's going into the water supply, contaminating our water, we got a big problem. We're going to affect lots of things with just this one so-called herbicide.
Well, and that's true. And the outrageous part of it is the EPA won't ban it until they really do an extensive review of this product. The EPA isn't going to ban it. They're going to say, oh, we'll just change the label directions and keep on using it. And I'm going, this is an outrage. In other words, they know that it's going to have an impact. And in other words, they're not going to be warning the public where this is used. And if the public were to know, the public would tell their commercial applicators, don't use products that can harm my trees. I mean, this has to be something that they're going to have to do. I think that if DuPont wants someone to use their product, they have to say, look, you can't go into the area for this long. You can't water this area. In other words, children can't play in this area. They've got to post the areas. And when the trees start dying, I think that DuPont should be liable for the damages. And boy, once they have to take responsibility for the liability, this product would be off the market real fast.
I think that's what that lawsuit is all about. Hey, would you believe this? I've got a contact at DuPont for email that people, if they have damage, they can contact this person. So let's go make it public.
Sure.
This is for an email. If you want any information or want to make a complaint about damage of potential, as they put it, potential Imprellis damage, then this is the person you contact by email. And I'll say it and then spell it out. Karen, Karen, Hartman, HARTMAN, at USA.DuPont.com. Let me go over it again. Karen.Hartman at USA.DuPont.com. And if you've got even potential damage that you think it's Imprellis, start emailing Karen, and let's let DuPont know that they made a big mistake and they are going to be liable. There, that's my public service. There's my public service for the week. I hope she gets a lot of emails because this is already, in my book, out of control, and it's showing up many weeks sometimes after they've applied this from what I've been reading. And if it's in the groundwater, that's the part that really opens my eyes, because now we're talking about it not just affecting evergreen trees, we're talking about it affecting people. I can't stress that part enough from my own view of this whole thing. So we have a super dangerous situation. This is like, to me, it's like Roundup on steroids. It's happening fast. It's happening really quick. With Roundup, some things have taken a while to show up. With this, it's happening almost overnight, and it needs to be banned, and hopefully the lawsuits will force DuPont into that position of taking it off the market themselves. It's the best we can hope for, huh, Rosalind?
Well, the first thing we have to do is make life so uncomfortable from DuPont that they take any products or similar products to this one that may impact, human health or the trees, et cetera, off the market immediately. And we have to apply pressure to our elected officials to have the EPA take this off, because the EPA says, well, we're going to sort of look at it and, see how it goes. And I'm going, no, you don't. I don't want this sprayed anywhere. And you know what? Anyone that hires commercial applicators, they better ask their commercial applicators for a copy of label. They better ask the commercial applicators for a copy of the material data safety sheet. You better ask whoever's doing work for you to begin to question what's being applied to the grounds and to public areas and private homes and all kinds of places, so that some of these chemicals, they're not used because they're too hazardous.
Mm-hmm. Well, DuPont is trying, I think, to do a little PR smoothing over things already. I'm sure you saw it on their site for their DuPont Imprellis that's on the Internet. They have an important notice, they call it. And this, again, to me, this is just trying to smooth it over. It almost sounds like saying, oh, there might be a problem with it, but then listen to how they finish this up. They say the DuPont turf team is investigating reports of various symptoms on certain species of trees and whether applications of DuPont Imprellis herbicide may have contributed to the observed symptoms. As a precaution, and now you think like, oh, okay, they're going to tell people to voluntarily restrict it. Nope. As a precaution, until we can more fully understand the circumstances, do not apply Imprellis where Norway spruce or white pine are present on or in close proximity to the property to be treated. They're trying to do damage control already, but that's not strong enough in my book. If you've got, and now they've proven, I guess since they posted this, it's more than Norway spruce and white pines. There's 4 trees, according to University of Pennsylvania. I need to find that real quick. UPenn put up where they were saying that 4 trees were affected. And of course, they're all evergreens. That's Penn State, their College of Agricultural Sciences, and they've got a warning out there about it too, ever since June 10th. So that's almost old news. Yeah, they want to do damage control. You know, Rosalind, this is like the BP thing all over again. Let's see how much of skirting the issue we can throw out there and how much we can say it's safe, just don't spray it near these trees, when they know darn well it's in the water table and affecting trees and such much, much further than where they apply it. You know, it's kind of like the oil is not really going to flow in the Gulf. Oh, my gosh, it hit the beach. We didn't expect that. We'll clean it up. Well, what are they going to do, DuPont, in this case, where it's in the groundwater? What are they going to wait for people to be affected to the point that they're sick or die from it because it's in their water? Then they'll find out this stuff is so toxic to humans and animals. Is that what it's going to take? You know, people and animals dying?
But you see, the thing is that once it gets into that arena where it starts affecting people or animals and gets in well water in different places, the thing is you've already ingested it and they're waiting to see, you know, you're going to become the guinea pig to test this chemical. But I don't think that we should wait any longer. They're spraying too many areas and putting this chemical on too many areas already. But I want to talk about one issue here that you may find of interest. When I worked for the Mendocino County Department of Agriculture, one of the things I did is put up traps where they're called sticky traps, And essentially what they do is you put them in a tree, a fruit tree, or any type of tree that you, or a grapevine, anything that you want to test to see what kind of pests are in that area. And when these bugs fly into the trees, some of them get caught in the traps. And then at a later time, we take the traps down and look at the traps very carefully to see what kind of pests are on the traps. And if we find any that are not supposed to be there, then that's when alerts go out. But in many places that I worked, not all, but in many places, the trees weren't organic. They were heavily sprayed with toxic chemicals. If I had to go into an area that was sprayed with toxic chemicals, they would post the area, and you'd have to stay out of that area for 2 weeks or 3 weeks, whatever the requirement was. And the hazard was that I was told not to go into certain places at all for long periods of time because of the toxicity of the chemical that was in that area, and that it could harm me if I went into those areas. What was interesting, though, is that animals, birds, pollinators, everything else, there's no one reads the signs at that level, and so therefore you would have all of these things going into this area that would be affected by this chemical as well. And it was of grave concern to me that I thought that we shouldn't be applying all of this because it gets into the tree roots, it goes up into the fruits and the vegetables. It doesn't just go onto, for example, the outside of an apple. So even certain stores in our area would not have fruit from certain orchards in them just because they knew that they were heavily laden and could test for and found toxic chemicals in them. So having worked for the Department of Agriculture, I kind of understand the premise from all of this. And from what I'm looking at with Imprellis and possibly other DuPont products is that this could be a really substantial problem where this chemical doesn't, in other words, bind with the soil or go away. This chemical is going to be around for a long, long time, and therefore we should not be using it anymore. It should be totally banned. And people have to understand that if you're not warned, in other words, when I worked for the Department of Agriculture, I was warned to stay out of those areas. I mean, they wouldn't even let me anywhere near it. And employees who worked at those places were told to stay out. It was posted, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, because it was so hazardous. But this chemical apparently is being used even though you're not to re-enter those areas within a certain specified period of time. And I'm concerned because commercial applicators apply it and then they leave the property, they don't post, notify the owner, and prevent people or pets or animals or whatever from being in those areas. It's a hazard to our children. It's a hazard to our health.
One of the keys, I think, that you just brought up does not bind with the soil. So, you can't even take where it's been sprayed and take the soil away if it was found to be an extremely hazardous toxin that, let's just say the EPA says it has to be removed because you poison the soil. Well, that wouldn't apply. It's not binding the soil, which means every time it rains, this stuff goes further and further down into our aquifers even. It's not breaking up. It's not binding the soil. It's not combining with things that we could even remove it. That's really what that's saying in my book. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. I'm just kind of throwing out a thought here, but not binding the soil means how do you get rid of it? And it's going to go wherever it's washed to, whether it's percolated through the soil into the aquifers and all our water supply, or heading into the rivers, into the streams, and then we've got another real big problem. How about if the fish start dying from it and the animals drinking water from the streams? So this stuff is going to be around. It won't bind the soil. That's my opinion. What do you think?
At the present moment, with what I know, I agree with you 100%. But I also realize that when this stuff starts leaching into nearby streams, the movement of it is going to be tremendous, and that you may not see the effects because people might not notice right away, or it's so far away from where the spraying took place that people might not identify that that's a problem. So this is a little ecological disaster that needs to be nipped in the bud, and DuPont has to do the right thing, and the EPA, and take it off the market.
Well, that's what needs to be done, but I got a funny feeling that's not what's going to happen, not until it becomes more of a serious matter. That usually seems to be the status quo. I mean, you've seen a lot of this happen with other things before, whether it's herbicides or whatever, like you were just speaking about. The system, the way that, especially with the EPA, and we're talking about the U.S. EPA, even with some state EPA agencies, are very slow to act, and so much damage can be done so fast. And apparently, by the facts that are coming in about Imprellis, this stuff really does act fast. 2 weeks later, you got a pine tree that's 30 yards away is all of a sudden having a problem where it's dying. So that's fast acting in my book. It's not taking years for it to show up.
Oh no, this is very quick. Considering they started using it in October and they've already got deaths across the United States, this is very fast acting. But it's criminal, in my opinion, for them to keep this on the market. I mean, there's no doubt in my mind that this is criminal. And the other thing is, New York and California both said that if DuPont can send them information that what they claimed, in other words, what New York claimed wasn't true, that in other words, that it could be approved in California and New York. I'm going to head this off in California. Boy, I tell you, I've been contacting everyone here in California to let them know that this may be approved. I'll tell you, I wrote to my congressman, U.S. Congressman Thompson, on this. I wrote to the County Board of Supervisors here in Mendocino County and let them know. And I think that we should just head it off here before it ever gets one drop, ever gets applied in California. Because, and other states and people need to take similar action and say, look, the risk is too great. We want a stop put to this. We want all of DuPont's products checked, not just this one, but every single one of them, to make sure that nothing gets approved that's going to have this potential effect.
Here's something that I didn't read, but I think this is important. This just came out today too. I mentioned about that one class action lawsuit with the Michigan Golf and Polo Club area. Well, there's another one that was just announced today against DuPont with the Imprellis, and this is a class action lawsuit from Pennsylvania, and even one homeowner is involved with this. And here's what they say. Their complaint specifically charges that DuPont failed to adequately disclose the risks Imprellis poses to trees, even when applied as directed, and failed to provide adequate instructions for its safe application. Here's what they say. They're working with leading academic scientists in the field of forest resources, tree physiology, and landscape management to further identify the cause and nature of the problem and to recommend steps property owners should take to preserve evidence. Now, that's encouraging, but a little bit too late. So this is how this has already accelerated big time, Rosalind, to something that's it's an overnight problem, without a doubt. It's an overnight problem. And here you've got within one day 2 different states with class action lawsuits, federal lawsuits.
Oh, absolutely. And here's something else you may find of interest. This is a July 17th news article, so it was just out, and it says, I'm going to quote just a couple of sentences here. It says, last November, DuPont Company began selling Imprellis, a new government-licensed weed killer. Imprellis looks like the kind of greenish, high-end proprietary product DuPont chief executive Ellen Coleman, needs to build her arsenal of biotech and agricultural chemicals as it rebuilds worldwide sales at its Wilmington headquarters. Less than 5 ounces an acre, the company told suppliers, kills clover, dandelion, wild violets, and tough ground plant golf course managers call creeping Charlie. The high concentration makes it cheap to ship, saves fuel, and DuPont said hundreds of tests showed Imprellis spared grass, trees, landscape shrubs, and crawling and walking creatures, if used properly. Well, we already know that 5 ounces an acre, I want you to think about 5 ounces an acre. Measure out 5 ounces. Look how little it takes per acre, and it's having an effect on trees.
Mm-hmm.
5 ounces
That's not
per
much.
acre. That's astounding.
I've got 10 acres, so it would only be 50 ounces could wipe out my entire 10 acres. How wonderful.
So you can see that when they say, well, it doesn't take much, well, look at how potent a very little is. In other words, 5 ounces and we're having it move off-site and kill trees all over the place. The potency of this product must be absolutely tremendous. Yeah. It shouldn't be on the market.
No, it shouldn't. It should have been taken off already.
But to think that this could leach, when you apply it, well, you mix it properly and you apply it, probably with water or whatever they apply it with. But anyway, what happens is that 5 ounces is not very much, and it's having this kind of impact.
It's a serious problem. This is well. That's why I wanted to have this special show about it, because you brought this up to my attention, and when I started looking at it, I'm going, my gosh, they must be crazy. This has only been approved since October, and look at these kind of effects already. This stuff is beyond toxic. This is super toxic, at least to living plants and trees. Yeah, it might get rid of all the broadleaf and the grass comes up real pretty, but at the sacrifice of what? Everything else around it? And that's kind of what it's looking like.
That's what it's looking like, too, and it's going to move other places. So when we're talking about, in other words, I'm talking about looking at all of the DuPont chemicals there, and you can go online, you can type in DuPont company, and right away, as soon as you get there, you can look up Imprellis, and you can look up all their other chemicals, and I think an MSDS sheet, and to look up into all their chemicals and just see exactly what they're offering us. Because it isn't just this one product either. I think that they could all be suspect.
Well, could be, and not just with DuPont. I'm sure there's some that are very similar to this that are either about to come out on the market by other companies, or perhaps are already out there. There might be a slight chemical difference in how they're made, but could have the same effect, and it could explain lots of problems that people have had when they're putting down herbicides, where it is affecting land even next door. So this just might, hopefully, that's what we need to do, Rosalind. We need to hope that this will, through you speaking on this show and us trying to get the word out, and hopefully the internet will just go ballistic with it, that people will see how dangerous it is and demand that DuPont shut it down. Start calling the local landscapers, and if they use Imprellis, tell them you need to stop using it right away, and if you do, you're poisoning all the places that you're applying it, and if you're applying it anywhere that's public land, like parks or anything, then we're going to demand that you stop, and we'll put pressure on if you don't stop that, gee, maybe you shouldn't be working for the county. Maybe you shouldn't be working for the state anymore. Maybe you shouldn't have that contract because you're deliberately poisoning. Sometimes we have to get that way, Rosalind. We have to demand, when we know darn well with common sense what's wrong, and yet the law, the so-called law, seems to back up everything but common sense.
Oh, I agree with you. Can I make another point? It's along a similar line, but it's it's a different chemical.
Mm-hmm.
I want to talk about Bayer Crop Science chemical called Movento, Movento. And we've had a lot of honeybee decline and mysterious disappearances and honeybee deaths. And one of Bayer's products, Bayer's the company that brought you Bayer aspirin, but they're one of the largest chemical manufacturers in the world. Most people don't know that. But they put a product called neonicotinoids. They manufacture them. And about the time that the honeybee decline started across the United States and in other countries, these new product called neonicotinoids were brought out. And this is a Movento is a product. You can go to the Bayer Crop Science website and you can look up Movento. It's one of their chemicals. It's a highly toxic chemical as well, much like this other one we've been talking about. And it's got precautionary statements of hazards to humans and domestic animals as well. And it has a long list of items. And it talks about environmental hazards. And it says this pesticide is toxic to aquatic invertebrates and oysters. Do not apply directly to surface waters or where surface water is present. And then you go down, and it says this product is potentially toxic to honeybee larvae through residues in pollen and nectar. And it says do not apply to, and it says it may not be dangerous to adult honeybees, but we don't know because they haven't done the direct, it doesn't look like they've done the testing. But it says that it's potentially toxic to honeybee larvae. Well, what happens is that there's a whole group of these products that have these neonicotinoids in them that could be potentially harmful to honeybees. And I don't see anywhere that we're dealing with this issue to find out if Bayer Crop Science and these nicotinoids are directly impacting honeybees. But in some countries where the neonicotinoids have been banned, it appears that the honeybees are doing better.
That's a common sense sign in my book. If it's been banned, then the bees are doing better. But, well, there's the frustration again. How do we get these agencies' attentions quick enough to be able to stop these kind of products from doing any more damage? How do you get out there? I'm not a big letter writer because I used to do it all the time, Rosalind, and I would write to senators and those in the House, my representatives, whenever there was a problem, and I'd always get a form letter back, and I'd always vote the way they wanted anyway, or so it seemed. Just my opinion, but it doesn't seem to work, even though we want to bring their attention to it. I'm afraid that corporations run everything, whether it's BP, whether it's Monsanto, whether it's DuPont. They seem to run everything, including Washington, D.C. And there's got to be some way that all this can come up with saying, no, you're putting out a poison product. If you don't ban it, then we need to make sure that nobody uses it. That's going to take a grassroots movement, and people are going to have to do it themselves. I don't count on the government for protecting me anymore. Not after the mess with BP. No, I'm obviously in my heavy opinion with this that the government has done nothing to protect anybody here in the Gulf of Mexico, even after the fact. I don't expect it with DuPont, with Imprellis, just like nobody is seeing any results of Monsanto with their genetically modified mess. And as you have researched so much with everything that's being sprayed in the air and the companies that make that, they're just going to do it anyway. They're just going to do it. And I don't think that we have a say anymore. I really don't. So if I know you wrote a beautiful letter. I saw your letter to our congressman, and I read it, and I just hope that they pay attention to it because it was very factual and it was outstanding. My point is they usually don't pay attention to it no matter how factual we are.
Well, the chemical companies have powerful lobbies in Washington, and they spend a lot of money lavishing it on our elected officials and their reelection campaign. The second issue that becomes with these chemical companies is that they're willing to suppress data, and they're willing to attack any scientist who speaks out against them. They immediately attack the scientists, and they make it so that they can get fired, they lose their jobs, they become discredited. So these powerful corporations have taken a line of attack that if you don't line up with them, that you're going to be on the outside and your voice is no longer going to be heard, or you're going to be attacked and become disreputable even though you're not. And what we all have to do is become informed. And just like with this tree issue, people are not going to want to have their trees killed. They're going to step up. And if we want to protect our food supply, we have to protect our honeybees as well. And if we don't step up, then it's going to be a disaster in waiting for all of us. Yeah,
that's the doom line, the disaster that's waiting behind every tree, so to speak. We've been just about an hour, Rosalind, and I do want to talk about the smart meters and such if you've got the time. So how about we take a break here for about 3 to 4 minutes, just play a little music, I grab some more water, and I'll catch you back right after that. Does that sound like a deal?
That's perfect.
Okay, great. My guest this first hour, and we're going to continue on maybe up to another hour or about another half an hour at least, is Rosalind Peterson with Agricultural Defense Coalition. You can find her online at just like it sounds, agriculturedefensecoalition.org, or another site that she's got on there, which is both her sites just have so much information. You'll be there for weeks, believe me. You'll never read everything that's on there. She has got a lot of backup to the things that she sees going on with our agriculture and in our skies. And her other site is California Skywatch, and that's just like it sounds, CaliforniaSkywatch.com. All right, we're going to take a short break, and we'll be back with Rosalind in about 4 minutes. Thanks for listening.
Informed, enlightened, alive and amplified. This is the Living Light Network.
Done by DuPont itself, who has a vested interest in making sure that their product is marketed and approved by the EPA. So you don't have independent people always doing the testing. You have someone with a vested interest. So I have clear concerns about this, and I don't believe that they go through extensive testing. I think that they decide what they're going to test for or what they don't, and we don't know the worst of it. But I do have something from DuPont you may be interested in. Mm-hmm. DuPont is required by federal law to provide a material safety data sheet. It's called an MSDS, and this is online. The company is required to put it online. And one of the things they talk about is you're not supposed to contaminate water, food, or feed with this product. And if you apply it, you're supposed to wear protective eyewear to prevent contact with this substance. And you have to wear, in other words, certain types of shirts and pants and shoes. And the other thing about this product is since it doesn't go away, and I'll use a golf course, or we can think of it as in other words, a public park as an example. When this chemical is sprayed, they don't tell people not to go back in and wait a certain period of time before they can go back in, and the dogs and the pets and the children run around and play ball and do all these things, even though in this section it says if you go into an entry area which has been treated Okay, like if a worker goes into a treated area after it's once been treated, he's supposed to avoid contact with anything. And he's supposed to wear chemical-resistant gloves of any waterproofing material. He has
into the groundwater, which you just mentioned. So I think there's the key. New York State, by not approving it, said, look, we found these two problems. It's not binding with the soil. And then, of course, since it's not sticking or binding with the soil, it's going straight into the groundwater. And evergreen trees, especially, apparently like to pick it up, or they're the first ones to so far. Who knows how many other trees it's going to affect.
Well, if it gets into the groundwater or runs off, if you have rains, it floods, it runs off into rivers and streams, because it doesn't degrade, it apparently is going to be a problem when it gets into those areas as well. That's why a lot of us are concerned about this particular product, because it isn't going to go away. It isn't going to stay put where it's sprayed. It's going to move into other areas.
Well, I'm thinking if this is going in the groundwater and it's affecting trees, how does it affect people? Because it's going in the groundwater, whether it ends up in a reservoir, whether it's from our wells that even community systems use for their water supply, if it's in the groundwater, how does it affect us if it's already affecting trees like this? And nobody seems to have that answer. And apparently the EPA, according to New York Times, was testing it for 23 months. But what did they do? Just throw it on a bunch of dandelions and say it's okay? Apparently they didn't test it very well.
Well, even the toxicological testing is that they rushed the process and didn't do much testing on it. And I've only seen one toxicological set of information from the EPA. But the problem was they said, well, we didn't test for this and we didn't test for that. We looked at it a little bit, but not much. And so what happened is that because this apparently worked so well, they thought that they would rush it to market. And you have to also look at the fact that some of the testing is
Well, welcome to Monday edition of Living Light with Michael Edward, and I'm Michael. And today I'm having on a guest that I've had before, Rosalind Peterson, and she's with Agriculture Defense Coalition and California Skywatch. That's a couple of her sites. You can catch her just like it sounds online, agriculturedefensecoalition.org. And if you want to check out what she has there on what's falling from our skies, you can go to California Skywatch, which is just like it sounds, CaliforniaSkywatch.com. Anyway, Rosalind brought up to a few of us this new herbicide that DuPont has manufactured that's out there, and now it looks like there's some evidence it likes to kill evergreen trees. In fact, it's becoming, from what I've been reading today, to catch up on a little bit of what Rosalind has already found out. It's a catastrophe. So without any further delay, Rosalind, thank you for being on my show again, and you always have breaking news.
Well, sometimes I do, but thank you very much for having me as a guest on your show. It's an honor and a privilege to be with you today.
Well, it's reciprocal. What is it with this? DuPont's got this new herbicide, and that's what we're going to talk about. We've got up to 2 hours here today, and we're going to spend whatever time we need to talk about first with this DuPont herbicide, they call it. I'm sorry, I've got a total blank on the name. Imprellis, I believe. Is that right?
Yes, it's called Imprellis, Imprellis. You can look it up on the trees are dying across the United States in areas where this chemical was applied. Mm-hmm. And one of the Michigan State University professors, David Roberts, notes that much of the damage, quote, he's quoting, much of the damage we're seeing was unexpected, Robert said. Even some of the professional landscapers who applied it were shocked by the damage. And so what happens is this product apparently doesn't biodegrade. And so when it rains, why, then this product moves down into the ground and into groundwater, can get into tree root areas, and then from there, the trees just suck it up and it kills the trees. And the possibility that not only trees, but other off-site plants and trees that aren't expected may have died, and since nobody was looking for this, it may be even worse than we think.
I was reading up on it, and I had never heard of it until this came to my attention through you. And there was a article that was in the New York Times that I'm going to quote part of what they had, and this is what really seemed the key to me, and I'm sure you're going to agree. They said that Imprellis, which DuPont makes, this broadleaf herbicide, is sold in all states except for California and New York because they have a separate review procedure besides the national EPA. They have their own EPA-type procedure to, approve products like this. So according to the New York Times, in New York and New York State, they had informed DuPont that there were two problems with Imprellis, and of course they did not approve it. One, that it does not bind with soil, and two, that it leaches.
Online. Imprellis is an herbicide that is listed as one of DuPont's products. And an herbicide, in case you don't know, is something, it's a chemical that will kill weeds. They think that a lot of weeds that we have with us are noxious, and therefore there's a number of products called herbicides on the market that have been used to kill different types of weeds. And one of the things that happened with Imprellis, which is manufactured by the DuPont Chemical Company, is that it was recently approved back in October with a minimum of actual studies, either health studies or with knowledge about the type of damage that it can do. And so what happened was they decided that it wasn't safe enough for the public to apply it. So they made a decision that they were only going to have professional commercial people who apply these types of products to golf courses, to parks, public parks, to playgrounds, to areas where schools, areas where children play, pets run, all kinds of things, where they wanted to keep the weeds down. And they only want the grass to grow. And so what they've done is DuPont said, oh, well, you just apply it according to label directions and everything should be fine. Well, beginning last October, they said, well, this product is wonderful. It really does work. It kills all of these noxious weeds we don't like. And so commercial people across the United States began to apply this material in parks and golf courses and all kinds of places, backyards, wherever they were hired to come in and to professionally, essentially liquidate weeds. So all of a sudden now, thousands and thousands